My son.
Couldn't do anything, it's really fast because of.
Oh, okay. And I'm gonna turn off the phone.
Okay. Oh.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Just give me the sign. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning, and what a nice crowd. You have a crowd like this all the time. I'm just amazed that everybody came out today. Glad the program wasn't yesterday, right? So, thank you for coming, and I hope you'll find this program interesting. If you can't hear me, just wave your hand at me or something. I'm not used to using one of these. The program is going to be on then and now, and as I started thinking about this program, a number of things came to mind, and as I kept going and going and going, I mean, it could go on forever. So we may have to have another session just to pick up some of the things that I didn't cover in this one. I want to introduce Dixie Brown, who's here to help me and has put together a table of items from the museum, along with Heather Young. They worked on putting together some items we found around the museum that represent what was in the past and compared to what we use now. I used to hear people say how they remembered the good old days. So we're going to go back and look at some of those good old days. And I wonder at the end whether you'd rather be back in the good old days or you're happy having the conveniences we have today. So let's get started. And I want to take the time to just comment on the fact that Oregon has evolved from a farming community, if you will, a village that pretty much catered and served the farming community, to one that is a suburban community. So a lot of the changes that you see are going to be kind of related to the fact that we've come that way and the complexion of our village has changed. So the first slide. So we'll start out with, and just raise your hand if this is not coming through. The first slide is the two pictures of the Netherwood block. The one on the left, probably, I'm sorry, wrong slide. Let's go to the next one. Do we have that? No, go on to the next one then. There we go. This building was built by Charles Netherwood. We call it the Netherwood block. Not to be confused with Netherwood Hall, which used to stand on the corner of Jefferson and North Main Street. But both were built by Charles Netherwood. This went in around 1898 was when he was doing his building. If you look at the building as it is now and as it was then, you kind of pick out three distinct sections of it. So I refer to them as the west, the center, and the east sections. So if you look at the older picture, the western section, as I remember it, was occupied by Drs. Roysum and Kellogg. And then Dr. Dukeshine joined them in 1951. Roysum and Kellogg were there in 1949. Then, of course, Kellogg and Dukeshine relocated, building a new clinic on the north side of Oregon. And after they moved into their clinic, Norm Champion and Earl Brandsey purchased the building. They made extensive remodeling to the downstairs and the upstairs apartments, and they operated their sheet metal business out of that area. I see Ann is here. I don't know if she has any other comments about how they were there. I know you used to visit, you used to be there as a child when your mother and your dad were working in the shop.
And I filled in for the receptionist. If my Aunt Marlene didn't show up, then I had to answer the phone.
There you go, child labor. Okay, so now Mark and Mike Nelson, they also had a dental office in that section, and now Dr. Kyle Murphy runs his dental office off that section. The center section was where the library was in 1916 until 1941. In 1941, that's when the Village Hall, the one across from the Waterman Park, was built. And the library moved into an area in the Village Hall at that time. Other ones that were in the section there, Winona's Beauty Shop. I don't know the years of when these were there, but they occupied some space in this building at some time. H&R Block, White Ceramics was there. And the far eastern section in the early days was the city meat market. If you look real close, and I'm guessing you won't be able to distinguish it from the slide, but there is a sign on the window that says Home Bakery. How many remember the Home Bakery? Yeah. Zella Wales made the best chocolate donuts ever. Now Senior Peppers is there. Okay, one more. This is the building on 113 North Main Street. It was the First National Bank of Oregon at one time, organized in 1914. A.H. Schultz was the president. C.N. Shilton was the cashier. It closed during the stock market crash of 1929 and did not reopen. I do recall Doc Johnson had an office there, I think, and the post office was there at one time. And then came W.H. Dunn. He had an insurance office there from, I think, around the late 58 to 63. Bill Hagstrom purchased that from him, and he operated it, later joined by his son Charles, and the building was sold to Jerry Thiel in 2017. During the lifetime of that building, there were several businesses that operated out of there, like the Chamber of Commerce had an office there at one time. Lyle Beggs, who was an attorney, had an office there. Ginger and Roger Nelson, they ran a tack shop there. Western wear, boots and bridles and all that stuff. That's a tack shop, yeah. And let's see, other people there, Russ Avery had a real estate office. Waffler and Gassner also used it for a real estate office. Chuck Sell was there for a time, and more recently it was the Recreational Concepts, and I'm not quite sure what it is today.
It's the wine reserve now.
Is it the wine reserve? Okay. Then we go to the Bank of Oregon. It was established in 1900 under the management of the Lytle family. And the picture on the top right is J.F. Lytle. He was the cashier. He is standing beside a very old adding machine. But I do remember using that. And it stood there in the lobby or just out behind the teller line for a long, long time. And it was an old-fashioned with all the keys and all the rows in it. It added, and that was about it. Charles Netherwood rebuilt this building after the previous building burned down, and it came to be known as the Phoenix Building, rising from the ashes of the old building. The bank went through a number of remodeling projects. They added a drive-up window in the rear of the building on the west side. I gotta tell you one little joke about that, because we used to have the bookkeeping area that looked out over the drive-up window. And one day, a gentleman came in, and you were supposed to go in the alley and come around this way. But he drove in this way and was going like this, so of course he's over here and the window's over here. And he came in and he said, you have to bring a passenger to use this? We straightened him out. Along with all of the remodeling, the bank expanded its area to the north, and we took in the Warner Electric that used to be there, Wishoff Jewelry, and the optometry, and Lawson Drugstore. And Lawson Drugstore housed an ATM machine, one of the first ATM machines that were available. It was called a time machine. Take your money everywhere, that's what it stood for, but it was a time machine. And it was you could walk in the front door, and then of course it was barricaded off and locked off and so forth. But the unique thing about that in my memory is that if it ran out of money at any time, especially after business hours, it would ring somebody to come and fix it. Guess who got to do that? But it was like a robocall. So it was a recorded kind of thing, and it had that recorded kind of tone to it. My kids loved to answer the phone, and then they would mimic it and say, the time machine at the bank is out of order. You've got to go down there and fix it. So yeah, we'd go down there at various times of the day or night to do that. Then the bank purchased 2 houses on the west side of the alley behind the bank and built a drive-up facility there, and used that for a long time before it was taken down and the current building that stands there now took its place. But it was the site of the first motor bank that we know of too. The original Bank of Oregon went through a number of acquisitions. Like I said, we started out as the Bank of Oregon. Along came Valley Bank and acquired us. Valley Bank was headquartered in Appleton, Wisconsin. Then M&I took over Valley Bank, and we became M&I Bank. And now, lo and behold, BMO Harris Bank has taken the M&I Bank under its wings, and we're the BMO Harris Bank. The original building was torn down, I think it was in 1989. There's a small park that's situated on the side of it now. The next slide features Cornelia Neely DeJane. And she ran a fabulous hat shop, or millinery shop. And it was a staple accessory for women in the early 1900s. Her designs, if you'd see pictures of them, were some of them really fantastic. They were large, usually with big brims. They were trimmed in artificial flowers or feathers. But again, a fading demand and trend in apparel kind of lessened the demand for hats. And so we probably don't see a millinery shop very often if we travel through. Maybe some of the small towns might still have one, but it was a unique trade that she developed and was made the hats at that time. So instead, we probably go to the mall, or we go to Walmart and get our caps and our bonnets. Baby. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, this one is fun. This is the Connor and McDermott buildings. On the left, if you can make it out, the very first buildings starting at Jefferson Street and going south are the Connor building and the McDermott building. Started out that these two gentlemen, J.P. Connor and Bernard McDermott, both owned grocery stores, small grocery stores. And Bernard McDermott decided he was going to build a larger store. And he built the large 2-story building that's there now. And he sold groceries in one half of the building and had yard goods and other accessories in the other half. J.P. Connor also had a small grocery store and dry goods place, and he decided he wanted to get in on the action, I believe. They had somewhat of a stiff competition going between them as to who would garner more of the business in town, because they had similar trades. So in 1908, J.P. Connor moved his little small store that was sitting kind of in the middle of Jefferson Street at that time out into the square where the monument is. He continued to do business as a grocery store and yard good store from that location while he built a similar building right next to the McDermott building. So if you look at it, I know you can't tell it from that picture, but if you look at that building, you would swear that it is one continuous building that takes in what is now Sonny's and the Chocolate Caper. It's actually two buildings. Two buildings, and I don't know if Mr. Connor decided that he did that on purpose to make it all look like one. But they operated separately out of that one kind of unit there. So now we see in that building, of course, Sonny's occupies the J.P. Connor part for his restaurant. The Chocolate Caper has the McDermott building side. Next one. This is the blacksmith shop. It was located on North Main Street, close to the hitching park. And again, another casualty of changing times was the demolishing of that building in 1987. It was kind of a blessing in disguise because Ida Lumley watched that building being torn down and was feeling like there goes a piece of history that we're never going to remember unless somebody does something about it. So she went home and she was discussing it with her mother, bemoaning the fact that, you know, this building was going down and with it a lot of history and everything, and her mother looked at her and said, well, why don't you do something about it? And so she did. She went to the Observer office. Butler Delaney was the publisher at that time, and asked for his support, and he gladly put things in the paper about it and so forth. And then she gathered some of her friends and created the Historical Society. So the fact that that building is no longer here, you still look at where it was and think of that really was the seed that was planted for the Historical Society. But for obvious reasons, there was no need for a blacksmith shop. The farmers were using tractors now instead of teams of horses, and cars were becoming more prevalent, of course. So horse and buggies weren't in tune at that time. So that kind of faded into oblivion. The next one is the livery stable. This was located what would be right behind Sonny's, like in the parking lot there. And again, like the blacksmith shop, it depended on the fact that we had horses that needed shoeing and so forth. And so that likewise was a thing of the past. Okay. The next one is this you will recognize. I just love the architecture on the building that you see there. That used to be the Marvin Hardware Store. And the lodge, with its symbol on the top, occupied the top floor for many years. We haven't lost those institutions. We still have the lodge. It now lives on the corner of Park and Spring Street. And of course we have Doran Hardware now up in the North Side Mall. So we have those, but this building is still in use. Okay, who's in there now? Is that where the Ready Set is? The Ready Set. Let's see how often I come into town and go to those places, I guess. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Mail delivery. The top photo is out of the collection from Florence Paulson. We believe it's her dad, Peter Paulson, who was the postman. And he's shown with his team, or I guess there's only one horse there, but his horse and cart that's loaded to take the mail around and deliver it. The post office itself has had a number of places, like I said, including the old First National Bank. And then from there, it moved over to what is now the Kraus Donovan building, next to the Pro Modern Hair Salon, across from Waterman Park and so forth. And then, next slide. And then it moved, of course, to Brook Street after it was moved out of there. Maybe you'll recognize some of the people in that photo if you've lived in Oregon for a while and knew the people. Anyone want to take a guess? Say it loud.
You can't think of their names.
Oh, okay, let me help you out. I bet you will. Far left, that's Eileen Olson. That's Bob Olson's wife, right? Next to her is Stella Beeson, Ron Harrington, and the last gentleman, of course, is Gordon Hanson, who was the postmaster for a good many years. Charles Waterman came to Oregon in 1849, and he purchased 200 acres of land that stretched basically from what is now downtown almost all the way out to Oak Street, off from Janesville Street and then down. Sure wish my last name was Waterman. But he also had the land where the first hotel was built. And it was the Exchange Hotel, so it's built in the vicinity of where Senior Peppers is and that the Netherwood bought at that time. He had a nephew, Justin Waterman, who was orphaned, and Charles raised him. When Justin married Annie Osborne. I don't know if she's related. We did have a village president named Osborne. I don't know if she was related in that manner or not. But when she died, Justin gave some land that is now the Waterman downtown park. It was located across the road from the Waterman homestead, and I can remember being a student in first grade in the village hall, and in recess we could go out and play in the park. And I'd always look over across the street at that house, and Charles Waterman had horses there. And we weren't allowed to go over there, but at least we could look at them. There was an old bandstand erected in the middle of the park. The gate that recognizes Annie Waterman Memorial Park. I don't know when that came down. I think I know where it went, but I don't know when it came down. The cannon that stands there were two cannons actually. One was across the street at the village hall. I think it was melted down for use in artillery and so forth for the war. But then another one was placed out there, and we still, and I think the next slide shows that we still have the park there with the cannon in it. And now we have a new bandstand, and it is the site of our band concerts by the community band and the Historical Society's ice cream social, by the way. Just a little advertising. The park has been downsized quite a bit to make room for some parking and so forth, but it still continues the traditions of having the band concerts there and so forth. Okay, let's look at the next one, please. I hope you go back one. My granddaughter decided to help me last night. So she said, I can fancy this up for you. So she included a few graphics in it. I think they're cute. I don't know if you can see the word moo there, but you get the picture. Yeah. Okay, the next one. At one time, local businessmen would close down their business or leave their business for a period of time and go out and help some of the farmers take in the crops. And this is a picture of one they're working at the, I can tell by the picture adjacent to it that they're at the Bill Jones farm. That would have been, you know where the waterfall was, I hope everyone knows where that was. So he was up kind of on the hill from that, his farm. So in this picture on the left, far left is Owen Richards, then Cletus Brown, Anton Frederickson, and Wallace Allen from the Allen Lumber Company. And in the picture, standing was Mrs. Jones, that was Alice, a wonderful cook. She used to cook for the waterfall. And Bill Jones, or William, is standing next to Lawrence Gladden, and sitting then at the table was Frank Adams, Anton Frederickson, Cletus Brown, and Lester Crotty, and that would be Bill Jones's mother, Mrs. Elmer Jones. So it was the custom when these people came out and did the work that they'd get a meal. And I can just imagine it was a really good meal if Alice was cooking it too. But I have a personal recollection of a similar kind of thing that I grew up on a farm in the Sand Hill Road area. Neighbors, we had the Berkeys to the south of us, where the Copies is now, and so forth. Liddell's up on the other end. But all of the farmers in that kind of neighborhood would kind of get together, and they would do a threshing. They'd form a threshing crew, and they'd move from farm to farm. So when it was your turn to have them at your farm to do the crop, the women would come, the wives would come, the friends would come, crack of dawn, and start cooking for this meal at noonday. It lingers in my mind that one, and I was probably pretty little at the time, but nevertheless, that they were fixing the meal, and all of the farmers came in and enjoyed their meal, and there was pie and dessert there, apple pie. I had strict orders that you do not eat until all of them are done eating. You know the end of the story? Yeah, that pie is gone. I had my eye on it for so long, and it was gone. And I thought, oh, they're all leaving now, I can get it. Yeah, it didn't work out. So just a few slides to show you how harvesting was done with the horses, drawing the wagons. This was probably how the hay was drawn up on the wagon. On the right, they're planting corn, I believe. Lower left, that's tobacco. Tobacco was a major crop around here for a long time. Of course, it has kind of gone downhill, and we don't see very many farmers raising tobacco now. But at one time, it was a big cash crop for them. It was hard work. There was hardly anything mechanical in doing tobacco planting, harvesting, or anything backbreaking. My sister raised tobacco, and I had a chance to find out just how it was. But from planting it to cutting it down and sticking it on the lathe, hanging it in the shed, and then letting it cure out, and then stripping all the leaves in and putting it in bales, and then kind of wondering whether you'd get a good price for it when you got done. But I do still remember her with her little axe, and she'd start at the top of one row, and she would go the length of the row, chop, step, chop, step. She never stood up until she got to the end of the row. And yes, she had back problems when she got old, but that was the way it was done. On the next slide, we've got some modern equipment. These dudes are big. And if you meet them on the road, Forget it if you're on one of the back roads. And I sometimes come across one because I like to take the back road into town and so forth. I come across one and I'd like to grumble and, you know, because you can hardly get around them unless they actually pull off. But you have to stop and think. Be a little patient, take a breath, and remember where our food comes from. Yep. More graphics from my granddaughter. So here's how milking was done. Of course, on the right, that's back quite a ways where they did all the milking by hand. And you notice it's women. I imagine that's the term for milkmaids or whatever, but I kind of think it was because the farmers were probably out in the field and the chores were probably left to the women and the milking to be done by them. So that's why you probably see a picture of them milking their cows. Of course, modernization came. We started losing the small farm where, you know, it was a family farm. And we started seeing larger dairies spring up. And they would have, as some of the smaller farms even had, what they called milk parlors. So in that lower picture on the left, that's how the milking parlors were set up. The cows were in kind of stanchioned off areas, and then they were elevated a bit, so you didn't have to bend down on your knees and put the milkers on the cows. You could just put them on standing up. And they had substantially larger gardens and larger silos than we used to have on the family farm as well. And like I said, the family farm is kind of becoming a thing of the past as well. When you consider the work that goes in from a farmer who gets up early in the morning and goes to bed late at night and hardly ever, I know in fact, hardly ever takes a vacation. And all of the work could be a lot of manual work as well. And then you never knew whether your crops were going to fail, whether you'd have good weather or what. So it was an iffy situation, and I can understand why other generations coming decided not to carry on the family farm, and it ultimately would get sold probably to a larger company that would carry on the larger scale. Okay. So we're going to deliver the milk now that we've got it milked. Back in the day, and this is Harry Netherwood, I think, because he had a team of horses that he called Tom and Jerry. And he had them attached to his milk cart with the cans in it. So as he went around town, he went from house to house, and he had a dipper that he would dip into the cans and fill up the containers at the households, of course. Later, there was bottled milk, and I think he did some bottling at his plant too. We had a number of farms that did do milk bottling and so forth. Lower left is Pleasure's Cream Station. Now that was located where the village hall on downtown stands. It was relocated. I think I'm not quite sure. I think it went to some place on North Main Street, perhaps. I don't know if anyone would remember that or not, but it was moved so that they could build the village hall there in 1941. This is the creamery on Market Street. It was operated by a man named Sam Lerner. He actually lived in Chicago, but he had this creamery up here. And at one time, because we had a milk route and we picked up cans, we would deliver cans of milk to the plant. And later, we had a bulk truck, like you see here, delivering the milk there. It typically was shipped out probably to Milwaukee or Chicago from there. Okay, more graphics. Here's an early kitchen. And in the top photo we just took a shot of the kitchen exhibit that we have at the museum. So you're gonna see a few things, maybe a little bit harder to pick out, but we're gonna talk about some of the items that are in that kitchen. And then you might compare it to what kitchens might look like today. Quite different. So back when we had, you want to flip back to that last one? Right here on the very end of the picture on the top, that green thing is an ice box. And we'll see a better picture of it as we go on. But it held the ice that cooled and gave them their refrigeration. So we had the Culp brothers. On the left-hand side, that's Ernie and Ed, their brothers, and they would go out to Lake Harriet and cut ice off the lake, store it in this shed. I think they had straw in there, but they have you're shaking your head, you maybe remember that. Yeah. They'd store it there until they would go around to the residences and deliver their ice. So the way that they knew, and they would cut it into chunks, different pounds, like 25, 50, maybe 75 or 100. But the homemaker would have a little card that if she wanted to have ice delivered, she would put the card out, and it had 4 sections with the pounds that she wanted of ice. How big a chunk of ice do you want to leave me? So it would be 25, 10, 25, 50, whatever. And if she set that card out, whatever was on the top is what they would leave. So here it is, but in better form. You can see that in the center photo. On the left-hand side was where, I'm sorry, I think it was on the right-hand side that you put the ice block. And then there was a tray underneath it that caught the melting ice. So therefore, on the other side, the left-hand side is where you would store your food. I don't know for how long that would last, but as long as the ice was cold, it might keep it cold for a few days. The next one is a later model of the ice box. Well, not ice box, I guess we'd call it a refrigeration unit. It has, I think that's a condenser unit at the top that's creating the cold air for the freezer, or for the refrigerator. I don't know. I assume it might be electrical. Does anyone know whether that was it electric? Okay, so you did have to have electricity to use that one. Now compare that to the one on the far right. This blows my mind. I don't have one, but they call it a smart refrigerator because you can do so many things with it. Take my notes and tell you what they can do on that thing. For one thing, it keeps track of the food in your refrigerator. I suppose you have to have some kind of program entered in there, but keeps track, and then it will tell you if it's time to reorder it, or if it's run to its expiration date, for instance. If you have a Wi-Fi connection, you can share pictures, you can stream music and videos, and you can plan your weekly menu and have access to all the recipes you need, and then it'll remind you that on Monday you're going to make such and such a meal. So far, it doesn't clean the thing out when the food goes in. And we have a stove. Upper right, that stove is at the museum in the kitchen display. It's one of the most interesting things when the grade school kids come for tours. They always were a little fascinated with that. It's a wood stove. It's hard to distinguish it, but in the center of that, on the top, it's a waffle machine. Looks just like the one you see in the hotels, only the ones in hotels are electric and they don't require you to manually flip it over like, well, I guess you do have to flip it over. But this one had to set on the stove and be heated that way. But they are fascinated by that. And then of course, you know, it had wood, it wasn't always the cleanest. The chimney, you had to make sure you cleaned that out pretty regularly too. Below that picture is an updated model of I think that's an electric range. So I don't know what period that would come to, maybe in the early 50s, something like that. And the rest of the slide kind of gives you an idea of what a kitchen might look like today. One of the things I always ask the fourth graders who toured was when they come into the museum and look at the exhibit, what one item don't you see here? It's that microwave. There was no microwaves way back then, but nowadays, you know, kids even know how to run the microwave, so they can warm up things and sort of that way. But, so we have the microwaves, we have air fryers, and sometimes we have combinations of them running together as well. Okay. Losing my place. Oh, washing machines. Well, obviously, that one on the top over there is probably one of the first washing machines that you had. And it did have a wringer on it. Pretty much that was the extent of it being modern. We also had to have like our wash tubs and our washboards. So down on the left at the bottom, we had that. I remember that we had a Maytag, looked just like that one up there, that we had. And that was, of course, electric and was considered to be quite the new thing. But then along comes washers and dryers. So in the center and the bottom, there's a set that probably is familiar to most of you and have a washer and dryer in your home. But the one on top, another smart thing. This thing is a combination washer and dryer. One unit does both, washes and dries. It does not take them out of the dryer, fold them, put them away in your closet or anything like that. But you get everything in one unit. One. This is where I want you to skip that one and go to the next one. Okay. I'd like to get you to play along with me here. We're going to look at a series of telephones as they evolved over the years. So, I'm going to start over here at the end. This is a flip phone. Does anyone remember having one of those? If you do, raise your hand. Good. Next to that is the next generation. That's the iPhone or the, and I'm assuming that most of you have those too. Hands up. Okay. Is there anyone here who doesn't have one of those? Okay. Then the other one there is kind of a model portable phone. So it's sitting pretty much on a charger there, but it is kind of the one that you could take a certain distance away from the base and use.
The first cell phone.
The first cell phone, huh? Could be.
Yeah, you can put that in,
All right.
you can put that in the vehicle.
Very good. Let's go back one. See how many hands we can keep up here. How about this little princess phone down here on the left? Bottom. Remember that? Thank you. The rotary phone? Yeah. Most people remember that. How about this one up at the top that looks like a candlestick? Yeah, you remember that too? And then there was one that they called the cradle phone. And I don't remember seeing those. Anyone have one of those in their home? And then the one that I do remember is the wall phone that you had to ring. And you were, yes, 95F12. I still remember our number. And it was a long and two shorts. And it was a party line, and everybody could hear everybody's conversations. Great. Let's go. So, who invented the telephone?
Everybody thinks Bell.
say?
Everybody thinks it's Bell.
Everybody thinks it's Bell. Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, here we go. It could be said that all of the above is the right answer. In some way, they had a part in the invention of the phone. I don't know if I'm saying it's right. Mucci, maybe, constructed a telephone-like device in 1854. Elisha Gray also designed a telephone using a water microphone in Highland Park, Illinois. Edison invented the carbon microphone, which produced a strong telephone signal. But it is Alexander Graham Bell that has most often been credited as the inventor of the first practical telephone. And he was awarded the first U.S. patent for the invention of the phone. Okay. Music. Kronk's Opera House is depicted up on the top left. I don't think I remember this, but maybe somebody does or has heard about it. I've heard about it. It was probably the main place of entertainment and so forth back in the early turn of the century and so forth, early decades. They had plays were put on there. I think they had movies that were played there, silent movies probably. It was a place that people gathered for meetings. Music recitals, maybe dance recitals, and other types of vocal entertainers and so forth. But it was probably the highlight or the what would I call it, the movie theater of the day back then. We have on display at the museum these two pieces of musical. One on the left is Harvey Berkey, and he's the one who came to our place and played the fiddle. Max Gaffney there has got the guitar. Both of those are on exhibit at the museum. So people made their own music, and I don't know if I told you when they came. My mother got to be known as the Barber of Sand Hill because she would take all of the men of the neighbors. There were 3 Berkeys, Harvey, Bully, and Johnny. They all came and got a haircut. Elmer Larson lived on the other side of the road, and he and his brother Pete and 3 boys, they all came for haircuts. My mother never charged anybody anything for a haircut. And she cut a lot of hair. But I guess we got paid in a way because a lot of them were musically inclined. Harvey and Johnny played guitar and fiddle. Pete Larson played the accordion. My brother-in-law played the harmonica. So if we could get all of those guys together one night, it was quite a nice concert that they put on for us. And not one of them read sheet music. It was all by ear. Yeah. Okay, I had to throw Dick Clark in there. If you don't know who Dick Clark is, you probably don't belong in the senior center. Oh, but I do remember that I couldn't wait to get home from school. If you had a television and you were a teenager, I'm sorry.
That building that's on the top left.
Oh, yes,
What stands there now?
the Firefly.
The fire.
Oh. There was a number of things before it was the Firefly, but yeah, that's where it was. So Dick Clark had the show called American Bandstand, and it was the thing that most of the teenagers had to tune into at the time. In the lower left, that's the Victrola. And it played long playing records, as you see there. And we've come across ads from Wishoff's jewelry that he sold those kinds of the Victrola. Over here we got the iPod, is that it? You know I don't know what those things are. So, but anyway, they're listening to music that's being streamed and they're just playing it through their earphones. Bands, we had community bands. You see at the two top pictures, those were the community bands. And on the lower bottom, that's the Oregon High School marching band. So they all provided entertainment one way or another. Next. Summer Girl. I had to throw this one in. It does, you know, it really belongs in the sports category, but I just couldn't go into every bit of the sports that evolved from way back then till now. But I had to throw the Bloomer Girls in. They were a traveling basketball team. And, yeah, and we have a picture of them in their uniforms, basically. It's not like what they were today. But they used to play baseball out on the end of Jefferson Street, in an open field out there. So Summerfest goes back a ways to what was originally, back in 1932, the volunteer firemen got together and organized a fall festival. And they called it, that's in the top picture, that's the hitching part. So you do see a few things that maybe are present today. But the feature of the old fall festival, it was kind of in the fall so that the farmers could come in, their crops were being harvested, and now they could come in and enjoy some fun. But the main attraction was the baseball tournament. And that was very popular. But along came World War II. And in World War II, most of the young men were in the armed forces. So it kind of put an end to the fall festival. Then in 1965, the chamber thought it'd be a good idea to have a festival again. So they organized what we now have as Summerfest. And we have some exciting brides that you won't find me on. The first schoolhouse actually was on North Main Street. Hard to tell here, but the center section was 2 stories, and then there were 2 add-on additions. It was dismantled into 3 parts. That center part moved down to where Maria's is now and became the village hall down there. The other 2 sides moved further north on North Main Street and became residences. This is a scene from a school, maybe a 1-room school, because you can see the sign up above. And kind of depicting how some of the desks were, we used to have those kind of desks, and they were kind of like on skids. Would have a little bit of a space underneath there to put a book or something if you need to store it. Okay, the next one. Okay, one more. So on the left is what I call the tan brick building. It was the old, for me it was the old grade school, but I imagine at one time it served everything until the red brick was built and used as a high school. They put an addition on that and had additional classrooms for the elementary grades, and that kind of circled on the south side of the building and then angled to the north in the head classes. Kind of interesting of the windows that you see in it now. Okay. Now I kind of lose track because we have a lot of schools and I don't know the names of all of them. So Dixie, can you help me out?
The upper left is Forest Edge, which is out in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Close to Madison. The second one is Brooklyn? No.
That one, the far right is RCI,
Oh,
which is the 5th and 6th grade.
Okay. Then the bottom left is the middle school.
Okay.
Going toward Brooklyn. And then there's the Brooklyn Elementary School, which is part of our school.
Uh-huh.
And then we have Prairie View on the left, Oregon High School. and then a picture of the old school and the red brick school.
Yeah, and you get a better idea there of how it wrapped around there. And of course, it was torn down, the major one. And then the red brick. Okay. And then maybe just a word about hotels. In the early years of Oregon, we had, at one time, we had 3 hotels. 3 hotels. We've talked about the Exchange Hotel. It was originally called the Chandler Hotel because that's who built it. But then it was, when he went out of business, it got renamed to the Exchange Hotel. The Grand Central Hotel was where the corner store was. And right at the corner there of Park Street, North Main, kind of about that section that all came together. And then the other one was the Oregon Hotel, and it is the building that, it's not the building, but it was on the site of the building that we now occupy as the Oregon Historical Society's museum. And that was the Oregon Hotel. And it was built across, of course, from the railroad. And back in the day, the salesmen would come to town. They were called drummers. And they would come to town and visit all of the businesses. They'd stay there while they were doing their business in Oregon. And most recently, we have a new hotel called the Sleep Inn and Suites, which of course is down on the south side of Oregon. I think that's it.